We are Melanie and Stephane Begaudeau from Begaudeau, and we are here to present you how to leverage existing and new features in Sirius to improve the user experience of your designers. So why user experience matters? User experience, and notably poor user experience, is a hot topic when you create an application. While UX is important for any digital product, it is even more important for products that are expected to manipulate a lot of complex pieces of information. Neglecting it can result in a sloppy product that people will just not use. So, on the contrary, developing an interaction-rich experience will drive users back to your product. User experience is how a person feels when interacting with your product. It includes a lot of factors that some are controllable by designers and developers, and others that depend on the environment, and some that are just a matter of preferences. These factors include the design, aesthetics, usability, ergonomics, accessibility, performance, utility, and overall human interaction.
Taking care of user experience means that you have to pay attention when you decide in which way important information should be presented. User experience should be part of the product development process, but you don't hear about it unless something goes wrong. It should be an integral part of your development process from the first design to the final product. Because when you relegate it to a nice-to-have status, it often gets left out. So consider it from the beginning.
To improve the UX of your graphical designer, you have to work on 3 different levels. The first one, the look of your designer. The second, the way the users feel when they interact with it. And one of the most important parts on its usability. The look of a product is not only the aesthetic appeal, but also how it creates credibility and trust with users and captures the spirit of what the users expect. For example, one of the first decisions you have to make is the kind of shapes to use. Here, all the nodes are represented in the same way, with a gray-purple rectangle, and you can't easily determine the information displayed, and you don't know how it is organized. You would have to look for details, like the label of each node or the edges, to find out what is going on. Just by replacing the purple rectangles by explicit icons representing males and females, and by improving the layout of the diagram, you can get directly that this diagram is showing a family tree. The small details like labels are not so important now.
Icons are a good way to organize the complexity of the element displayed in your diagram. So are good colors. A good practice is to define a color scheme and then find a color palette from it. If you're not comfortable with user interface design, a simple solution is to find out a base color for your elements or for each category of elements, and then create variations of those colors for your diagrams. People love consistency, so choose consistent colors. It will make your diagram appear more professional, and it will make it more comfortable to work with. As I said before, people love consistency, so when things are different, it will attract the user attention. If you want to make your user look at some important concept, you need to work by changing the consistency of your diagrams by using different size for your elements, or different shapes, or even different colors. You can have a base color for your element and another color to highlight some specific of those elements, and work with variations of both.
So using icons, is really useful when you want to quickly provide a piece of information graphically. One of the most interesting improvements coming with Sirius 5 is a new decorator mechanism. This new mechanism helps you manage the complexity of the information that you can display to your user by adding some additional icons to your mappings. In Sirius 5, there are 3 kinds of decorator. The first one is mapping based. You can associate the decoration to a mapping, so it will be linked to your graphical elements. The semantic based. You can associate a decoration to a semantic element, so it will be linked to your model element. And generic one, you can specify a decoration according to just a predicate expression. For each decoration, you can specify where it will appear, north, south, northwest, southeast. And if you resize the mapping, or if there is too many decorations defined on the same position, a tooltip will appear showing all the decorations available.
Okay, so first, for this first example, we will have a look at how we improved our BPMN designer. So you can see it right here. It displays how to order a pizza with interactions from the pizza customers and the pizza vendors. So one of the first things we done is define 3 major colors: the green for the lanes, the blue for the task, and the orange for gateways. We define them and their variations in our color palette. You can so you can see here our various colors and variation, and we reuse them in our style for some of our elements. We also work to make sure that we add icons that are consistent with those colors. So, for example, we made sure that the icon of our mapping was similar to the icon of our tools, using some SVG files for our mapping and using PNG ones for our tool. We have such a consistency in our diagram that users could even use it with icons only, because they would be able to have the similar icons between the mapping and the tools. So last year we introduced the DSL to define properties view directly in the ODesign, and now you can add icons in some of those concepts. For example, in a button, you now have the ability to use an image expression to display a small icon. So for example, you can copy the qualified name of the icon and then paste it here. And when you go back on your element, you can have the icons also in the properties view. You could even remove the label to have only the icons on buttons and other widgets. We also talk about the new decorator mechanism. So I'll just copy and paste some example. So here you have the definition of a generic decoration. It can appear on any kind of mapping. We will just define that it will appear on the northwest, and we have specified the image which will be used for this decoration. In order to select precisely where it will appear, we have typed this predicate to make sure that it only appears on task. So if we go back on our diagram, you can see now that we have this small icon on the northwest. But if we want a decoration which appears only on a specific mapping, we can use the mapping-based decoration. So now I just have to select the mapping task. And this second decoration will appear on some of my tasks, only the manual task, because I have a precondition to filter this kind of task. And as Melanie said, if the mapping is too small to display all the decoration, we have a tooltip showing you all the decorations that are located on a specific mapping.
Remember, users decide in just a few seconds whether a product is worth their time. That's the only opportunity for you to get them someone in your project. So when it comes to poor user experience, the issues are noticeable, and all of these programs create a negative emotional connection to the product. Your users need to enjoy interacting with your product. By working on the UX, you will introduce your grumpy users to Mr. Happy. The feel of a product is all about creating something that is a joy to use, that is crafting positive, pleasant emotions in users as they interact with your product or react to it. How to develop a pleasant product? That's quite simple. You should put yourself into the user's shoes. You should think the way the user thinks. And in fact, you should become a user. Remember that the developer never ever feels the same way the user does. So you are used in Sirius to create direct edit tools to edit labels and diagrams, tables, or trees. When you develop this kind of tool, remember that the direct edit tools are not only for editing labels. You have to create direct edit tools which are smart for your user. For example, imagine that I have a property defined in a UML class diagram. I am a UML designer user and I want to update the cardinality of my property. When I edit it, I just want to change the cardinality to many just by typing a simple star. I don't want to type anything more. So don't hesitate, provide shortcuts to your users and advanced features.
Okay, so if we go back to our designer, we have a direct edit tool defined here. So I think this direct edit tool, we just modify the label of a selected element. So for example, I can use it here to change 20 minutes in 60 minutes, but I would have to type everything all the time. So if I only type 60, it does not update the label completely. So because this direct edit tool is very simple. You can change this behavior by using advanced services. So for example, here we have created a small edit service which is used to offer some content assist for your user. So when you modify the diagram using the direct edit tool, you can now use this service instead. So when the user will type, for example, 20, now it will type 20 minutes completely. So do not hesitate to customize the behavior of the Sirius tool to create shortcuts and more advanced tools. You'll see another example later in this presentation.
We saw that the appearance of your product is important, and we just brought to your attention that you have to rethink the behavior of some of your tools to be smarter according to your user expectations. It doesn't matter what your product looks like if people don't know how to interact with it. You have to polish not only the appearance of your product, but also its usability. Usability is a core concept in UX. The idea that products have to be easy to understand and use. Bad usability breaks UX. It is about the effectiveness of the product and how user-friendly it is. It is a key component of the overall user experience. Your product must be functional and predictable.
For example, last year we released the support for properties view definition in the ODesign file, but many users came to see us and complained that it was a bit painful to create everything manually, to create each widget for each property of each object in their meta models. So this year we have introduced a new menu which can create the default behavior of a widget for any single property in your domain class. So we'll see a demonstration of that one later. We also have introduced new mechanism. So the first one is a new model operation named let, which allows you to create temporary variables which can store the result of an expression. So in your tools, you can create more complex behavior by storing some results which can be reused later. If you need user input in some of your tools, we also have two new model operations, Open Dialogs and Open Wizard, which allow you to open a dialog and a wizard to request some information from a user much more easily. So for example, here we have a new create tool. It creates a man in a simple family tree. And instead of creating an empty object, it will open this dialog where the end user will be able to enter some information. And after clicking OK, then the real object will be created in the diagram. We also have the support for validation rules and all the other things that you have in the property view description.
With Sirius-5, you will not be able to reuse the same properties view definition easily. An extension mechanism already exists for diagrams. Now we have something quite similar for properties view. Thanks to this feature, you will be able to reuse anything from a simple widget to a whole page with multiple groups, widgets, styles, and even validation rules. You can now share those parts of your design between the properties view, the dialog, and the wizards. You will see that it will improve drastically the maintainability of your specification. For example, on this screenshot, I have defined the dialog with its own group and with another group extending the first one from the properties view. And I'm able also to change the title of the group easily thanks to the new mechanism, thanks to the new extension mechanism. And this will not impact the first one defined in the properties view. I will show this in the next demonstration. And you see that we are getting not only the widget, but also the validation rules. Another mechanism that we will demonstrate just after was also introduced in Sirius-5 to provide to the specifier a way to customize an existing specification which cannot be modified because it doesn't have the whole design.
Okay, so back to the demonstration. So, as I told you before, we now have the ability to create the default behavior of the widget for you in a group if you specify the domain class and if you register your meta model in the properties object. So now you have this new menu giving you the ability, we don't see the full label, giving you the ability to create a widget with the default configuration. So for example, I can create a text attribute, a text widget for the name attribute, and everything is already configured on this text widget properly. I could also create a widget for a checkbox and maybe a reference widget too. So it's very easy to create something much more powerful and much more quickly than before, and everything has already been configured. So for example, here I can see the incoming link to my task, and I could edit all the link very quickly. I can also create dialogues now very easily. So for example, I will create a new tool to edit an object when I double click on it. So it will be used to edit a task right here. So this is a regular double click tool. And now I have access to this open dialog operation. So I'll pick the title of the dialog. And when you create a new dialog, it's already pre-configured with some option. We create two buttons by default. The first one is OK, which will have the default behavior. So if the user press enter, this is a button which will be active by default. It will also close the dialog if we click on it. And cancel will close the dialog and roll back all changes which have been made in the execution of the tool. So it also creates a page. We can change the label of the page, for example, dialog page, I'll change its ID to. And it comes with a group in which we can create, for example, a simple text widget with a simple label. So now if I double click on a task, just close and reopen it. So if I double click on the task, my dialogues appear, and everything inside of the dialogue has the same behavior and appearance as in the properties view.
So here the first approach was to recreate widgets under the new dialogues, but with the new extension mechanism, we could simplify this. And first, if we now remove in the example the text widget, we could remove also the group. And instead of creating new group, we will go to the extend tab of the page, and we will set that we want to extend the default page of the properties view. So now when we save, if we double click on the task again to open the dialog, you see that we inherit all the elements from the definition specified in the properties view. And better, if I go to the general tab again to change, for example, the label expression, to see the name, for example, of the element we are selecting. Now we are able to override the inherited values. Now we will show also that this is exactly the same mechanism used by the wizards.
So now I can, for example, create a wizard in instead of in another tool. I create just another wizard. I'll put it on a gateway, for example. Say all gateways. So now I can choose to open a wizard. So when you configure a wizard, you have to select the title of the wizard, the title of the window, the description, and things like that. So I'll just write some simple value so that you can see the result. And inside of the wizard, you will have to define a page with groups and widgets too. And here we'll use the same mechanism. We will extend the default page so that we don't have to create everything again. Or I think we had a more complex example.
Yes.
Just sorry. Yeah, that one, sorry. So here we're creating a wizard with 2 pages. In the first pages, we will only display a single widget, and in the second page, another widget too. So if we right-click here, we have our tool, and we have the wizard, which contrary to the dialog has a next and back button to change pages, and we have the result here, which can be triggered with finish. We could also use an expression to determine whether or not we can change the page and whether we can finish the wizard.
Then
so we could extend here the default page here and have in this wizard also the same elements that we are inheriting from the properties view.
So this was the extension mechanism, and we had in Sirius 5 a new mechanism to override an existing design. So this allows the specifier to override the behavior of an existing specification, but without modifying it directly. For example, I can create a new override text, and this will override the existing name widget we defined before in our properties view. And we just want to override it to add a new style. For example, I want that this overrides element would be underlined and italics. So here Stephane will select a new element to override, which will be our name widget. It's saved, and he will add a new style. And this style will just change the format to bold and italic. Now if we save, if we go back to our diagram, on the task and the property view, you can see that now all our name widgets are in bold. Okay. Let's go back to the slide.
So don't forget to help your user discover on their own the features of your designer. The Sirius team worked on some features for that in Series 5 to help create intuitive and discoverable designers. So we try to improve the fluidity of the workflow of the end users with two new features, sorry. We have, first of all, a wizard to help you create new models. We also have a session editor to manipulate the AIRD files. We'll demonstrate both of those features in the next demonstration. We also have access to an activity explorer. It does not come directly from Eclipse Sirius. It's in the Amalgam project, which is part of the Eclipse modeling component.
So first we will demonstrate the IRD editor. This editor is a kind of session editor which allows the final user to manage the Sirius session by creating new representation or by creating new semantic model. This editor is released in Sirius 5 as experimental and so is not activated by default. But first, why did we introduce this editor? Imagine that it is the first time you have to use a designer based on Sirius. So you are, for example, on the Java perspective. And before Sirius 5, unless you switch to the modeling perspective, you have almost no chance to be able to open a representation easily. From Sirius 5, if I expand the modeling project from any perspective now, I can right-click on the representation file and the session editor is available. You can open it. And in this editor, I can manage the semantic models available in the Sirius session, the viewpoints, and the representations. I can finally easily open for example, my pizza diagram by just double-clicking on it. As I said, this editor is not active by default, but you can change this behavior in order that it opens automatically when a session is loaded. This is possible thanks to a simple preference. The second feature we added in Sirius 5 to improve the user experience, the final user experience, was to introduce a new wizard for model creation. In the session editor, you can create a new semantic model, and this uses a new wizard which will allow you to create the semantic model. So the first page, you will have to select, for example, the meta model you want to create, the model on which meta model you want to create a new model. So for our example, we select BPMN, and then on the second page, we propose the possible route of your model. Here we just have one, which is definition, but we are also able to select other elements if we want. And on the third page, you just define the file name of your new model. You can contribute to customize the behavior of this generic wizard thanks to a new extension point, which is named package metadata. And in this extension point, you are able to set the display name, which was for us BPMN, and some documentation. And then you can contribute also the suggested route you would want. So in our example, it was only definitions. Finally, it exists, as Stephane said before, another way to help your user to find the features, which is Activity Explorer. This comes from Amalgam, and it is not included as Sirius right now, but we are thinking about including it maybe in the future, in the next release. An Activity Explorer looks like this. In the modeling perspective, you have a new menu, which is go to Activity Explorer, and you will have then a new editor with a first page which is an overview of all what you have defined like as action. Then on the other page, we can define all the actions you expect your user could do. For example, create a new process diagram, create a new process definition, or what you want. On the left side, you have the hyperlink, which just creates a new operation, which will just create some diagram, for example. And on the right side, you will have a tree where you will find all the representation based on the create tool you just used. Then you can contribute also other kind of pages like the help page, which just not create anything in your modeler, but can help your user to find some documentation, some tutorials.
To finish, just a small word on the process that you should use to create your graphical designer. Now, a team of the most talented programmer is not enough to create the best product. You need to develop it to see the product in the user's light. So a user should become part of your development team. For that, a user experience expert is required in your development team. It should come in your team as soon as possible, preferably in the design phase, but it would be better if such an expert was there from the beginning of the project when ideas are born. And you should make sure that the user's way of seeing things is part of every decision you make. Remember that the first design is rarely the best option. You have to test and iterate over and over again.
So what's next for you now? After EclipseCon, you go back home and you will rework on your Sirius-based designer. So remember, first, try to enhance the look of your designer by working and selecting consistent icons and colors. Second, develop smart tools to make your user feel joy when they interact with your product. Work on usability. And finally, help your user to discover the features of your designer.
So Sirius 5.0 will be released this month with Eclipse Oxygen, I think next week. We are preparing Sirius 5.1 for Eclipse Oxygen.1 in October, and don't hesitate to give us your feedback on forum or on the Bugzilla. Finally, there will be a Sirius-Con this year in Paris, just like last year at the same location. The call for paper has been open, so don't hesitate to submit a talk to show us your work. Thank you. Do you have any question?
Yes.
Is it possible, or will it be possible one day to reuse the property view, the pretty view outside of Sirius diagram?
Outside of Sirius session?
Not Sirius session, but you can be inside the Sirius session, but in other editors.
So technically, all the work done on the properties view has been done on a project separated from Sirius. It has been reused in other projects that are not Eclipse projects. So technically, it can be done, but the Sirius integration is done in a declarative manner with the ODesign file. You would have to use some specific extension point and some Java code, but you can do it. So for example, you can come at the booth later if you want to talk about it.
We have no more time. But if you have any question, we are at our booth. Thanks.
Thank you.